It was one of the hottest days of the summer, the kind of heat wave that makes you feel like you're walking inside an oven. Everyone in the neighborhood was struggling to stay cool. But for me, things took a sudden turn for the worse. Out of nowhere, my power went out. No fan, no AC, nothing. I figured it was just a glitch, or maybe the power company was fixing something nearby. But soon, I realized this blackout wasn't an accident. It was my HOA Karen. Yeah. The one everyone knows, the type who loves to micromanage the neighborhood and isn't shy about flexing her authority. Now, this wasn't just some minor inconvenience. Cutting off my power during a brutal heat wave was more than rude, it was dangerous. I wasn't the only one affected either. When I tried to confront her, she just brushed me off, acting like she had the right to do whatever she wanted. It felt like a personal attack, like she was trying to make a point and show she's in control. But I wasn't going to sit back and take it. That's when I decided to turn things around, literally. If she thought she could leave me in the dark and sweat it out alone, she was wrong. I found a way to power up not just my house, but the entire block. Suddenly, the tables were turning. The whole neighborhood was buzzing, and guess who was left powerless? Karen. But this isn't the end of the story. There's more to what happened next, and trust me, it's not what anyone expected. So stick around as I share exactly how I powered the block and flipped the script on HOA Karen, leaving her in the dark. You won't want to miss this. Before all this happened, I never thought much about the HOA or the people behind it. Like most of us, I just paid my dues and followed the rules, hoping to avoid any drama. But Karen was different from the start. She was always watching, always ready to point out the smallest thing. A flower bed not trimmed right. A mailbox a little crooked, even the color of someone's curtains. Some neighbors tried to avoid her, others argued back, but no one really expected her to take things this far. Cutting power during a heat wave felt like a whole new level. The neighborhood itself is pretty quiet most of the time. A place where families live, kids play outside, and people wave when they pass by. It should have been a safe space, but Karen's control made it tense. You could feel it like walking on eggshells around her. When my power went out, I called the HOA office first, hoping for a quick fix or at least some explanation. Instead, I was met with silence and vague excuses. Then a neighbor whispered that Karen had the power cut as some sort of punishment, because I'd spoken up at the last HOA meeting about her strict rules. That's when the real conflict started. It wasn't just about me being uncomfortable in the heat anymore. It was about standing up to someone who thought she could control everything and everyone. I realized this was bigger than a blackout. It was a battle for fairness and respect in the neighborhood. But powering the block? That was my way of showing her she couldn't just bully us without consequences. Still, not everyone agreed with me. Some neighbors were scared, worried about what Karen might do next or how far she'd push this power struggle. And Karen, well, she wasn't staying quiet. There were rumors she was planning something, but no one knew exactly what. The tension was rising. And the summer heat wasn't the only thing making things uncomfortable around here. As the days went by, the tension in the neighborhood grew thicker. On one side, you had Karen, who seemed more determined than ever to hold her grip on everything. She was sending emails, posting notices about community standards, and reminding everyone that rules were rules and breaking them had consequences. But behind the scenes, whispers traveled from door to door about just how far she was willing to go. People talked about legal threats, fines, and even more drastic actions that could affect anyone who dared to push back. On the other side, the neighbors started to split. Some quietly supported me, the one who stood up to her, even if they didn't say it out loud. They were tired of living under that kind of pressure, but afraid of what Karen might do if they openly rebelled. Others were more cautious, worrying that this fight would only make things worse, risking their own comfort and peace. The once friendly neighborhood was now divided by fear and frustration. There was also a surprising subplot involving an elderly couple down the street. They'd always kept to themselves, but when their power went out, they struggled the most. Without a sea, the heat was unbearable, and they didn't have the resources to fix it quickly. Seeing their situation made the conflict feel even more personal. This wasn't just about rules or pride anymore. It was about real people's safety and well-being. Some neighbors started organizing to check in on vulnerable families, bringing cold drinks and fans, quietly working against the odds while Karen pushed her agenda. Meanwhile, Karen's actions stirred up more questions than answers. Was this really about enforcing rules? Or was it something deeper? Some suspected she wanted to send a message to prove she was untouchable. Others wondered if there was more at stake, maybe hidden disputes over power, control, or even money tied to the HOA's influence. The mystery behind her motivations only made the situation more electric, with everyone waiting for the next move. No one knew how far this battle would go. But one thing was clear: the neighborhood would never be the same again as the heat wave dragged on. The atmosphere in the neighborhood felt heavier than the scorching air. Every day brought new challenges, new small battles that piled up until it seemed like something was about to snap. Karen's hold wasn't loosening, if anything, she was tightening it. Late-night meetings, sudden inspections, and even surprise visits from HOA enforcers made it clear she wasn't going to back down easily. The community was on edge, caught between wanting peace and fearing what might happen if they stood their ground at the same time. My own efforts to bring power back to the block grew bolder. I wasn't just fixing the blackout for myself anymore. This had turned into a neighborhood-wide mission. With the help of a few tech-savvy neighbors, we rigged up a system that kept the essential power running, bypassing the usual lines Karen controlled. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to light up the streets and cool down the houses. Word spread quickly, and the energy in the neighborhood shifted. People started talking again, feeling a flicker of hope amid the heat and tension. But Karen didn't take this lightly. One afternoon, I got a chilling message from her: thinly veiled threats wrapped in formal language, warning of consequences if I didn't stop. It was a clear sign she was planning her next move, and nobody knew how far she'd go to regain control. Rumors flew that she was ready to involve the city or even take legal action. The uncertainty made it impossible to relax. Everyone was waiting, watching, wondering when things would explode. Then came the night the whole block lost power, except Karen's house. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. It was like a silent message, a final challenge. The streets went dark, but Karen's porch light burned bright, mocking the rest of us. That night, tensions reached a breaking point. The neighborhood was buzzing with questions, fears, and whispered plans. The next move could change everything. What would happen when the power shifted again? Would Karen keep her grip, or was her reign finally coming to an end? Just when it felt like the tension couldn't get any worse, something unexpected happened that threw the whole neighborhood into chaos. A few days after that night, when Karen's house stayed lit while the rest of us were plunged into darkness, strange things started happening. Power fluctuations, unexplained outages, and even mysterious messages left on doorsteps. It wasn't clear if someone was sabotaging the grid or if Karen had secretly enlisted help to tighten her control. The uncertainty made people even more anxious, wondering who was really pulling the strings behind the scenes. Then came the real shock. One of the neighbors, someone I thought was neutral, suddenly took Karen's side publicly. This neighbor, who had quietly watched everything unfold, announced they were supporting Karen's decisions and warned that the community needed order at any cost. It felt like a betrayal. Suddenly, the fight wasn't just between me and Karen anymore. It was a full-on neighborhood divide, with alliances forming in unexpected ways. The peaceful street I once knew was now a battlefield of hidden agendas and mounting fears. At the same time, I discovered something that raised the stakes even higher. In digging through old HOA documents, I found evidence suggesting Karen's power cuts weren't just about control, they were tied to a bigger plan, involving property values and strict regulations that could force some families out. This wasn't just about a heatwave blackout anymore. It was about the future of the entire neighborhood and who would get to stay or go. The realization hit hard. What started as a simple dispute over power had turned into a fight for the community. Itself, with rumors swirling and tensions escalating, the neighborhood was holding its breath. Every day felt like waiting for the next storm to break. How far would Karen go? And how far would I be willing to push back? The next chapter was coming. Fast, and no one knew if this battle could be stopped or if it would change everything forever. The night everything came to a head was unlike anything I could have imagined. The neighborhood was buzzing with nervous energy, everyone waiting for the next move in this high-stakes game. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting, insisting it was to restore order, but everyone knew it was more than that. I showed up, along with neighbors from both sides, the air thick with tension and unspoken fear, as Karen laid out her plans, tightening control over utilities and enforcing new rules that would change the neighborhood forever. Stood up. I shared the documents I had uncovered, exposing how her power cuts were part of a scheme to push out families who didn't align with her vision. The room fell silent, the weight of the truth sinking in. Some faces turned shocked, others angry. The neighbor who had supported Karen earlier now looked uneasy, caught off guard by the evidence. Then, just as it seemed like Karen's grip was slipping, the power suddenly went out, this time everywhere, including Karen's house. Darkness fell, and the hum of frustrated voices filled the room. But instead of chaos, something unexpected happened. The neighbors started helping each other, people pulling out flashlights, sharing water, and making sure everyone was safe. It was a moment of unity, a reminder that despite the conflict, we were all in this together. But the biggest surprise came next. Karen, sitting in the dark, admitted she'd underestimated the community's strength. She agreed to step down from her role, promising a new approach that would involve the whole neighborhood, not just her own agenda. Relief washed over most, but the story didn't end there. As the power flickered back on, I noticed a small envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a note, simple but chilling. This isn't over. The battle for the block might have paused, but the fight for fairness, respect, and power was far from finished. The summer heat had brought more than sweat, had ignited a fire that wouldn't easily fade. After that tense night, things slowly began to change in the neighborhood. Karen stepping down wasn't the end of all problems, but it was a fresh start. The community came together like never before, organizing meetings where everyone had a voice, not just a handful of people with power. We worked out new agreements that focused on fairness, respect, and keeping our neighborhood safe and comfortable for everyone, especially during tough times like the heat wave. The elderly couple who had struggled the most finally got the help they needed, with neighbors pitching in to install fans and check on them regularly. That simple act of kindness reminded us all what this neighborhood should really be about: looking out for each other. The split between neighbors started to heal as people realized the real enemy wasn't Karen or the HOA, but the fear and silence that let problems grow in the first place. Of course, the note I found slipped under my door stayed with me. It was a reminder that vigilance is important, and that sometimes standing up means facing ongoing challenges. But it also showed how powerful community spirit can be when people refuse to let fear or control rule their lives. Looking back, what started as a blackout during a brutal heat wave became a turning point for our whole block. It wasn't just about power outages or rules, it was about standing up to unfair control and finding strength in unity. Now, even on the hottest days, we know we're stronger together. So if you ever find yourself facing an impossible situation, remember, sometimes the best power you have isn't electricity. It's the people around you and the courage to stand up for what's right. Thanks for following this story. Stay tuned for more, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for updates on what's happening next in our neighborhood.